everyone, and welcome to our adult story time. Today we're reading the second installment of The Machine Stops by E.M. Forster. So, last time we learned that humanity was basically staying in one room for their entire life. They stayed in their room, they didn't go outside, they only interacted through the machine. They didn't see anyone face to face. Interesting, huh? So our main character, Vashti, was asked by her son Kuno to come visit him all the way across the world so that they could speak face to face. So when we last left off, she was just contemplating the tunnel that led out of her room and whether she should actually take the first step. So let's see what she does, shall we? Of course, she knew all about the communication system. There was nothing mysterious in it. She would summon a car and would fly with her down the tunnel until it reached the lift that communicated with the airship station. The system had been in use for many, many years, long before the universal establishment of the machine. And of course, she had studied the civilization that had immediately preceded her own, the civilization that had mistaken the functions of the system, and had used it for bringing people to things instead of for bringing things to people. Those funny old days, when men went for change of air instead of changing the air in their rooms. And yet, she was frightened of the tunnel. She had not seen it since her last child was born. It curved, but not quite as she remembered. It was brilliant, but not quite as brilliant as the lecturer had suggested. Vashti was seized with the terrors of direct experience. She shrank back into the room, and the wall closed up again. "Kuno," she said, "I cannot come to see you. I am not well." Immediately, an enormous apparatus fell onto her out of the ceiling. A thermometer was automatically laid upon her heart. She lay powerless. Cool pads soothed her forehead. Kuno had telegraphed to her doctor. So the human passion still blundered up and down in the machine. Vashti drank the medicine that the doctor projected into her mouth, and the machinery retired into the ceiling. The voice of Kuno was heard asking how she felt. Better, then with irritation. "But why do you not come to me instead?" "Because I cannot leave this place." "Why?" "Because any moment something tremendous may happen." "Have you been on the surface of the earth yet?" "Not yet." "Then what is it?" "I will not tell you through the machine." She resumed her life. But the thought of Kuno as a baby, his birth, his removal to the public nurseries, her own visit to him there, his visits to her, visits which had stopped when the machine had assigned him a room on the other side of the earth. "Parents, duties of," said the book of the machine, "cease at the moment of birth. P.422327483. True, but there was something special about Kuno. Indeed, there had been something special about all her children. And, after all, she must brave the journey if he desired it. And something tremendous might happen. What did that mean? The nonsense of a youthful man, no doubt, but she must go. Again, she pressed the unfamiliar button. Again, the wall swung back, and she saw the tunnel that curves out of sight. Clasping the book, she rose, tottered onto the platform, and summoned the car. Her room closed behind her. The journey to the northern hemisphere had begun. Of course, it was perfectly easy. The car approached, and in it she found armchairs exactly like her own. When she signaled, it stopped, and she tottered into the lift. One other passenger was in the lift, the first fellow creature she had seen face to face for months. Few traveled in these days, for, thanks to the advance of science, the earth was exactly alike all over. Rapid intercourse from which the previous civilization had hoped so much had ended by defeating itself. What was the good of going to Peking when it was just like Shrewsbury? Why return to Shrewsbury when it would all be like Peking? Men seldom moved their bodies. All unrest was concentrated in the soul. The airship service was a relic from the former age. It was kept up because it was easier to keep it up than to stop it or to diminish it. But it now far exceeded the wants of the population. Vessel after vessel would rise from the vomitories of Rye or of Christchurch. I use the antique names. Would sail into the crowded sky and would draw up with the wharves of the south, empty. So nicely adjusted was the system, so independent of meteorology, that the sky, whether calm or cloudy, resembled a vast kaleidoscope wherein the same patterns periodically reoccurred. The ship on which Vashti sailed started now at sunset, now at dawn, but always, as it passed above Rias, it would neighbor the ship that served between Helsingfors and the Brazils, and every third time it surmounted the Alps, the fleet of the Palermo would cross its track behind. Night and day, wind and storm, tide and earthquake, impeded man no longer. He had harnessed Leviathan. All the old literature, with its praise of nature and its fear of nature, rang false as the prattle of a child. Yet, as Vashti saw the vast flank of the ship, stained with exposure to the outer air, her horror of direct experience returned. It was not quite like the airship in the cinematophote. For one thing, it smelt, not strongly or unpleasantly, but it did smell, and with her eyes shut, she should have known that a new thing was close to her. Then she had to walk to it from the lift, had to submit to glances from the other passengers. The man in front dropped his book, no great matter, but it disquieted them all. In the rooms, if the book was dropped, the floor raised it mechanically. But the gangway to the airship was not so prepared, and the sacred volume lay motionless. They stopped. The thing was unforeseen. And the man, instead of picking up his property, felt the muscles of his arm to see how they had failed him. Then someone actually said with direct utterance, "We shall be late." And they trooped on board, Vashti treading on the pages as she did so. Inside, her anxiety increased. The arrangements were old-fashioned and rough. There was even a female attendant to whom she would have to announce her wants during the voyage. Of course, a revolving platform ran the length of the boat, but she was expected to walk from it to her cabin. Some cabins were better than others, and she did not get the best. She thought the attendant had been unfair, and spasms of rage shook her. The glass valves had closed. She could not go back. She saw at the end of the vestibule the lift in which she had ascended going quietly up and down, empty. Beneath those corridors of shining tiles were rooms, tier upon tier, reaching far into the earth, and in each room there sat a human being, eating or sleeping or producing ideas. And buried deep in the hive was her own room. Vashti was afraid. "Oh, machine," she murmured, and caressed her book, and was comforted. Then the sides of the vestibule seemed to melt together. As to the passages that we see in dreams, the lift vanished. The book that had been dropped slid to the left and vanished. Polished tiles rushed by like a stream of water. There was a slight jar, and the airship, issuing from its tunnel, soared above the waters of a tropical ocean. It was night. For a moment she saw the coast of Sumatra, edged by the phosphorescence of waves and crowned by lighthouses, still sending forth their disregarded beams. These also vanished, and only the stars distracted her. They were not motionless, but swayed to and fro above her head, thronging out of one skylight into another, as if the universe and not the airship was careening. And, as so often happens on clear nights, they seemed now to be in perspective, now on a plane, now piled tier upon tier into the infinite heavens, now concealing infinity, a roof limiting forever the visions of men. In either case, they seemed intolerable. "Are we to travel in the dark?" called the passengers angrily, and the attendant, who had been careless, generated the light and pulled down the blinds of a pliable metal. When the airships had been built, the desire to look direct at things still lingered in the world, hence the extraordinary number of skylights and windows, and the proportionate discomfort to those who were civilized and refined. Even in Vashti's cabin, one star peeped through a flaw in the blind, and, after a few hours' uneasy slumber, she was disturbed by an unfamiliar glow, which was the dawn.